and that's fine. People can come in. The session is being recorded, so if you don't want to appear, just you don't, feel free not to speak. But the breakout groups won't be recorded, so you don't have to worry about that. So, yeah, there's clearly people from different places in the world. We've got someone from the USA, from Germany. We've got people in the UK, Australia. Wonderful. And yeah, obviously, the context of this festival is, we are living in difficult times. There's a variety of issues, and we're stronger by coming together, and that's what this festival's doing. So we're creating spaces for us to connect with each other, to have the conversations we want to have, and find the collaborators for projects and ideas. So do stick around for the breakouts and for the open space that's happening, throughout this festival, as that's where connections, new relationships can happen. You can meet some of the speakers. And this festival is also about being inspired, ongoing learning, and continuing political education and connecting these dots, right? So, yeah, we're going to be hearing from Ruth Kinna, who's a professor of political philosophy at Loughborough University. And Ruth specializes in anarchism as a theory. And yeah, so she joined the Department of Political Philosophy, and as a professor of philosophy in the Department of Politics in 1992, and she holds a first-class degree in history and politics from Queen Mary University of London, and completed her doctoral research at Nuffield College, Oxford. And we're also joined by Alex Pritchard, who also teaches at the University of Exeter. So thank you so much, Ruth and Alex, for coming and giving this talk. I'm looking forward to it. So I'll pass over to you. If you need anything, let us know. Just a quick reminder as well of the rules of this space. Elliot's put it in the chat. So hopefully it doesn't need, goes without saying, but it's always good to say it anyway. So please do respect each other. So yeah, Ruth, over
Thanks
to
very
you.
much. Thank you very much. So welcome everybody to the Anarchist Constitution. I'm going to set out the aims of the session and say something about the context. And we're going to run the session jointly between Alex and I. So, the main aim of the session is to put to bed the idea that anarchism and constitutionalism are oxymorons, that it's a contradiction in terms. So what we want to do is explain why and how anarchists constitutionalize differently, to avoid arbitrary power rather than to cement it. And the talk, the basis of the talk comes from a pamphlet which we produced with Thomas Swan, a friend and colleague, and the advocacy group Seeds for Change, which is free to download. You can just Google it. It's called Anarchic Agreements. And what we wanted to do in the pamphlet was share what we'd learned about grassroots group practices to promote the idea of constitutionalizing as an alternative to constitutionalism. So we're going to talk for about 20 minutes. There'll be a 15-minute breakout for which will give you time to talk about some of the questions that we ask in the pamphlet. And then there's a 10-minute session at the end where hopefully we can pick up any points or questions that you might have. So the talk is organized in 3 sections. So I'm going to talk about what is constitutionalizing. I'm then going to hand over to Alex to talk about what does constitutionalizing look like. And then I'm going to wrap up with why constitutionalize. So to kick off, what is constitutionalizing? So this is a word that you don't find in dictionaries, and we use it in the knowledge or conscious of the fact that conventional constitutional theory is deeply antagonistic to anarchism. So conventionally, constitutions are linked to the government of states. And if you just go online and Google constitutionalism, you'll probably find somewhere along the line that, and pretty quickly, that the US Constitution is typically identified as the first modern constitution. Even though we know there are centuries-old examples of constitutions in indigenous societies and in religious communities, one prominent example being the Iroquois Great Law of Peace, which brought together 5 distinct nations and set out rules of governance by consensus and for peace. before the American Constitution was written. So this was ratified in 1722. So what we do when we think about constitutionalizing is to tap into this longer tradition of self-organization and self-government. And in doing so, we take our lead from a 19th century anarchist critique of constitutionalism, according to which constitutionalism, with the ISM at the end, is a state-centric idea, and it is inherently elitist. So constitutionalism guarantees exclusive rights to property that entrench structural inequalities, and it uses law, which is backed by force, by monopolies of violence, in order to uphold those inequalities and those property rights, and equally importantly, to establish moral principles of right or wrong. So when you're subject to constitutional rule, what typically happens is that you're being told what you can do and what you can't do, irrespective of your own moral standards. So the alternative constitution that the anarchist critique produced is designed to empower people so that they can make their own arrangements directly with each other without having to rely on the force of law, and so that they can arrive at their decisions through dialogue. Now, that doesn't mean to say that people don't have disagreements. The point of the anarchist constitution, or of constitutionalizing, is to enable people to disagree, but to minimize the conflicts that disagreement otherwise produces, because people are competing with each other for power or resource in the existing constitution. So the organizational features of the anarchist constitution, I think, are reasonably well known. So rather than centralized power, anarchists argue for devolution, and they advocate for decentralized federalism. So what they want to do in principle is guard against concentrations of power or the monopoly of power. The decision-making processes are also, I think, quite familiar, at least since the Occupy movement. Anarchist groups have promoted participatory, non-representative systems of democracy, and usually also consensus decision-making. So anyone who's familiar with Murray Bookchin's work will know this as confederalism or libertarian municipalism or communalism. So constitutionalizing, the idea that we're trying to promote, has the same organizational hallmarks, and it's also democratic, but it focuses on the internal mechanisms that make decentralized federalism work. And it doesn't just rely on democracy to resolve the differences that people have when they work together in groups. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Alex to talk about what the Constitution in the anarchist tradition looks like.
Right. Thanks, Ruth. Hi, everybody. So what does constitutionalizing look like? It's essentially a process and not an event. I think this is the key difference. From the anarchist point of view, constitutionalizing is something you engage in continuously. It's a process of critical reflection, and there's no final point to which you arrive, and there's no fixed point of authority in the Constitution itself either. So this has three key parts. There's an ethic of association, there's a political culture, and then there's the political architecture or design of the Constitution itself. So let me take each of those in turn. So anarchist constitutions have an ethic of association. And key elements to this are that primarily individuals are sovereign. We're not choosers. We're not people who have to sacrifice our rights in order to be part of a political community, and those rights are then represented for us by others. We are sovereign bearers of our individuality, and we enter into constitution making voluntarily and with the aim of maintaining as much power as we can while sacrificing that we need in order to sustain the community. But of course, this means that we're socially interdependent. So our individual sovereignty is not sacrosanct. It's not an individualism. It's about the primary and the underpinning force of cooperation itself. This comes with an ethic of responsibility, of course, but it also assumes that dissent and disagreement is the basis of that cooperation. Okay, the cooperation doesn't emerge naturally. It's something that you have to forge through disagreement, through dispute and debate. Okay, so that's the ethic of association. And the second part of this is a political culture. And we've characterized this as the three C's. And there are three parts to this political culture. The political culture has to be consensual, has to be open to change, and our involvement in that political culture has to be conscious. So the consensual element is echoes with sort of Kropotkin's idea of mutual aid. This is the idea that agreements are only agreements when they're accepted voluntarily, where you respect the dignity of individuals and of communities, and that consensual element comes with deliberation and open dialogue. The second C is change. The aim here is to bake in the idea that constitutions are open to revision, to change, to adaptation to the social environment, and so on and so forth. And of course, constitutions change by the transformed makeup of those groups. And because groups change and they're morphological, they change all the time, we have to expect our constitutions to change with them. And the final element of this is that constitutions need to be consciously engaged with. Often it's assumed that our consent to existing constitutions is assumed, and that we're not consciously parts of these constitutional makeups of modern states. We're assumed to be citizens, and our consent is assumed. But what an anarchist constitution demands is that your consent and your involvement is conscious. That means that the constitution itself has a degree of intentionality, that the group itself is intentional to the degree that we're all consciously involved in it. Constitutions don't work if you're simply going through the motions, or that these are unconscious or by rote. That's where danger starts. Danger, danger. So how do you put this into practice then? So that has four parts. Okay, we've got declarative principles. So constitutions have four main parts, and this is common to all constitutions, not just anarchist ones. And I'll tell you a little bit about what makes anarchist ones unique, but these four things are common to all constitutions. So constitutions have declarative principles, the sort of preambles that frame the we the people, whatever that is. We are the 99% in the Occupy movement, for example. These declarative principles identify who the people are. Underpinning that then is the institutions that shape how the people come together, how they're divided, how the people are divided amongst themselves. Those institutions are framed by a set of rules. So this is the third thing that constitutions have. And those rules don't only dictate what you can and can't do, they also specify how you make decisions and how you can change the constitution. And then the final one is the decision-making process themselves. So these doesn't have to be majoritarian democracy. It could be consensus decision-making. It could be supermajorities. It could be sortition and luck. It could be all sorts of different ways of making decisions. But all constitutions have these four parts. So let me just give you quick examples. So in terms of the declarative principles, one of the things that we find really interesting and useful is the way that the Icelandic constitution was crowdsourced. So from 2011, after the banking crisis, there was an attempt to crowdsource a new constitution for Iceland. And let me just read from the opening preamble, because I think this kind of symbolizes what we're doing, but it also helps us understand the difference between what they did and what we're trying to do. So it opens with, "We, the people who inhabit Iceland, wish to create a just society where every person has an equal opportunity. Our diverse origin enriches our society, and together we're responsible for the heritage of generations, our country, its history, nature, language, and culture. Iceland is a free and sovereign state with freedom, equality, democracy, and human rights as its cornerstones." So you can see that this uses a state-centric language, but nevertheless, it still sets out the sort of principles of association that we're trying to get at with these declarative principles. And you can see this in a range of different institutions. So football clubs have similar sorts of things. Unions have declarative principles in similar vein. But what they do then is they're defining who the people are, they're determining how they should organize and what distinguishes them from others. So the norms and the institutions that underpin this then. So one of the key things that we take from the Republican tradition is that all constitutions essentially divide and balance power. And you can only really divide and balance power if you distinguish different aspects of it within a polity. It's not just individuals that make up a political organization, it's the groups that we form amongst ourselves. And the point of these institutions is to be able to balance those different groups and their interests and powers in relation to one another. And what an anarchist constitution tries to do is ensure that there is no one group that predominates over the others. And so to balance them amongst themselves in a sort of an anarchic constitution, that's where we're getting to anyway. The rules then, these can be formal rules, but they can also be unwritten. For example, common spaces or no smoking rules or noise rules in squats and camps, but they should align with the underlying principles of the Constitution. And then finally, these decision-making processes. So as I said, there are a number of different ways of doing this. Typically within anarchist groups, consensus decision-making is the norm, and voting is often seen as a sign of failure. So if you've got to resort to a majoritarian position, then clearly you've been unable to achieve consensus. So it's not to say that one is better than the other, but that they have different functions in different types of groups and different types of decision-making scenarios. Supermajorities are other ways of doing this, or sortition, where you essentially decide something on the basis of luck. Those are the different types of decision making, but each of these are appropriate to different types of decisions and to different groups. And you need to keep this open. And what we tend to do in modern liberal democracy is reduce it down to majoritarian rule. And that's what we're trying to get away from with this. The question is, why bother? So I'm going to hand back to Ruth now, who's going to tell us why we should constitutionalize at all.
Okay, just in a couple of minutes. I think there's a negative argument for constitutionalizing, and then there's a positive argument for doing so. So the negative argument is to try and rethink our fundamentals of organizing. So existing constitutions are designed to constrain the powers of sovereigns. They can be kings or they can be people, but whatever they are, they're sovereigns. And constitution, the whole idea of constitution is to supposedly promote the well-being of citizens by protecting their property. They say nothing or very little about the power of corporations. They remove from view the systems of violence that are used to enforce the rules, and they gloss over the systematic inequalities that the defence of property entails. So historically, we can democratize constitutions, we can change the ways in which power operates within the constitution, but fundamentally, unless we attack the idea of sovereignty, we're going to divide people into masters and slaves. That's basically what the anarchist critique is all about. We might be enslaving ourselves or we might be enslaving other people, but the sovereign is the body that makes the decisions in the end. And that sovereign is very difficult to control or to participate in, particularly in complex societies which are organized like states. So the positive argument for constitutionalizing is that it encourages us to think about what our common goals are. Rather than just assume, that we have these common goals and the sovereign is going to uphold them. What if we decided that we were going to connect with each other and discuss what it was we wanted to pursue in our politics, in our economics, what kind of cultures we wanted to promote? So constitutionalizing starts from the premise that we're going to have different worldviews. We are not all anarchists. We don't all think the same way. We have different talents and capabilities. We are likely to come into conflict with each other. So how do we organize ourselves? How do we constitute ourselves to enable this conversation about fundamental principles and rules and norms and decision-making processes? How can that work while minimizing conflict? And our argument is that it works only because we become conscious of the things that it is we want to do together and how we're going to do it. And we remain sensitive to the fact that all our groups and associations have the problem of power baked in. We never get to a situation where actually everybody agrees about everything. What we have to do is to manage conflicts in ways that don't set us into competition against each other. So constitutionalizing is based on a conventional conception of the Constitution as a mechanism for establishing balances of power between and within competing groups. It's a very realistic way of thinking about the world. Constitutions throughout history determine who should be empowered, which collectives matter, who initiates and enforces the rules. And it is for us collectively to decide those things, not for us to obey what the sovereign tells us, or what we've inherited on the back of some random history. So the whole point of the Constitution is to recognise the fact that groups are vulnerable to elitism, that inequalities are always problems that we have to resolve. And the only way we can do this, the only way we can deal with these problems is collectively through constitutionalizing and by not empowering any one of us or any body of us to decide how things should go. Okay. Thank you.
Amazing.
So thanks. So we're hoping now we can go into the breakout groups, and we've got some questions for people to maybe think about.
I've just put those in the chat.
Cool.
Wonderful. Great. So, Elliot, are you able to set up the breakout groups? How long do we want? Would you say, Ruth?
I don't know. We've got 24 now, haven't we?
Should
Yeah,
we say
10 minutes.
10 minutes, yeah.
Oh, sounds good. We can have four to five people in each group. Maybe that's enough. Then people have enough time to chat. 2 minutes each or so. Wonderful. All right. Elliot, I'll let you set that up. And remember to save the questions in the chat, because once you go into breakout groups, you won't be able to access them. Alex has just put them in the chat there. Here we go. All right. Wonderful.
Okay, I'm going to room 1.
I'm going to room 2.
I noticed there's still a few people in here who haven't joined the waiting rooms. Amanda, you doing okay? Says you'll be right back. Or Julie, do you need a hand with getting into the breakout groups? No, Julie's gone. Dan, do you need a hand getting into the breakout groups? No, Dan's gone. Earl, are you doing all right? You there, Earl? Earl, are you there? A few more people joining back, and then pass back over to you, Ruth. Oh, I think you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, welcome back to the main group. So we had a really interesting discussion about the groups that people were part of and the kinds of overlapping memberships that that existed. So between, for example, church groups and gardening groups, we also talked about degrowth a little bit, and tried to we didn't get to the other questions, but it was enough actually, and thought about how constitutionalizing, or how this idea, the fact of overlapping memberships of groups provides a basis for thinking about building more resilient or more formal relationships across groups in order to provide for services on a different basis, a not-for-profit basis, or on the basis of mutual aid, as opposed to to the extractive model that is used by states. Don't know whether anybody wants to say anything about the discussion in the other breakout.
Shall I say something about our group?
Yeah.
So we talked about 2 or 3 different types of groups and the ways in which decisions are made within them, and about how change is sometimes difficult from the inside, and about how systems of decision making can often stymie opportunities and initiatives to transform groups, and about how this is frustrating, and how it leads to burnout and splits and so on. And then we talked about other groups where, trying to make sure that you hear as many voices as possible is sometimes really difficult, and the difference between thinking about functional solutions to those sorts of problems and moral or principled solutions to those sorts of problems. So on the one hand, you say, oh, if we just tinker with our decision-making process, we'll get to the right answer, versus this idea that actually, if you have your principles up front, the decision-making process is not as important. You can essentially wing it. So that was another way. And then we were thinking about, in the third discussion, about how you link up different groups that might not have similar views and groups that do across large geographical distances. And we didn't quite get to the end of that because we got shunted out of our breakout room. But those were the sorts of, it was really interesting.
So, does anybody have any questions that we can answer in the last sort of 5 minutes of the session?
Feel free to put your hands up, or you can, put something in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
Go for it, Duncan. You're on mute. No, can't hear you.
If it's not working, feel free to put your message in the chat, and then we can read it out for you.
Jared, did you want to jump in? Are there technical?
Sorry.
Is there
okay.
technical?
I've got a quick one. I wasn't allowed to unmute. It's sociocracy. Tell us about sociocracy. What you reckon?
This came. So I don't know very much about this, but I know that there's a branch of thinking about organizing that's very similar to the sorts of ideas that we're developing. I mean, maybe you should tell us what you understand sociocracy to be, and then we can take it from there, because I'm not a student of that branch of thinking, but I think it resonates with what we're talking about. Multiple, plural. I often think about it as sort of people who want to talk about anarchism and organize in anarchist ways, but don't like the word. And so they call it sociocracy or polyarchy or heterarchy. I mean, there are synonyms for the sorts of things that we're talking about across the social movements that we're all part of. But I think what we're trying to do is sort of re-embed this in the long 150-year history of anarchist thought and the thought that predates that, of course. So, this isn't to say that they're fundamentally different, but I think what it means is the sort of plural groups organizing as a collective without a center of power, and thinking about organizational structures that enable that to come together. I mean, that's essentially what we're doing too. There's just different principles that underpin it. I mean, I think the key difference for the anarchists is that front and center, you are saying that you deny any fixed and final point of authority, And I think that is what distinguishes the anarchists from everybody else. That's not to say that other groups don't do similar things. It's just that from an anarchist point of view and with an anarchist politics, it's that rejection of a fixed and final point of authority that is central to the Constitution.
Right.
Did anybody
Amazing.
I do have a cheeky another one about plans and visions and how
Shall
you
we-
square that. The
Shall we come to
coherent-
Jared first? Is that all right?
Yes,
And then
please.
we
Sure.
can.
Please.
Oh, I'm going to see if I can unmute you.
And
Okay.
you-
Can
you-
you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you now.
Yeah. This was just off of the point that you brought up, Alex, about your breakout room. In settling principles or the decision making, the rules first, and which one you would use as the foundation. Is there, as the anarchist experts, sort of a preferred approach, or one that you think is just better with the anarchist model?
Do you want to answer this
That's an
one, Ruth?
interesting question. I suppose, I mean, that's really interesting. I suppose the groups that we've been looking at and working with have started with declarative principle, and everything else has kind of followed from that. But I mean, I think in real life, actually, what happens is that possibly, people come together informally without thinking about why they've come together. And I guess what we're trying to encourage is to be conscious about the project and to then think about the principle in order then to develop a kind of a collective consciousness of the aim and purposes of the group in order to sustain it better. Because the worry that we have, I suppose, or what we're trying to address is the tendency for informality to result in the end to differences which are buried or unexpressed, and the group then falling to pieces. So in a sense, I don't think it matters where you start from, but I think it matters that you start.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Shall we come to? There's quite a few questions in the chat. Shall we do some of those? Is that all
Yeah.
right? Does that sound good? Cool. So, we've got Amanda says, can anarchism function at scale beyond Donar's number?
Shall I have a go at that? We can
Yeah,
both have a
sure.
go at that.
I've got
So-
so much to say about this, but yeah, go for
Yeah,
it.
so our argument is that scaling up is the wrong way to think. So rather than think in terms of trying to replace what exists, what we're trying to do is to think about how you can encourage federal relationships between groups that you're already members of and groups that you find valuable in order to expand the realm of self-government. So instead of trying to say, can anarchism work on the basis of the state? Well, no, it can't, but it's not designed to do that. We're not trying to sort of say it's a zero-sum game, that there is either anarchism or anarchy or there's the state. What we're trying to do is to think about how people, through their social interactions, can organize effectively through a constitutional process that doesn't entrench authority and power, and therefore nudges back against the institutions that otherwise will oppress us and exploit us.
Can I just add one thing quickly?
Yeah.
So historically, the attempt to scale things that work at a local level is part of the problem.
Yeah.
So, this is whether this is, the Tredegar social insurance that essentially became National Health Service or whatever it is. The attempt to scale good ideas is where you get into problems. And so what we're saying is that rather than trying to expand and then demand a bureaucracy that can manage at scale, what we're saying is keep your activities local and then link up with people that are like-minded, or with people that you need to make agreements with and cooperate with who are not like-minded, but you need to work with for whatever reason. So it's link up, don't scale up is the ethos.
Right. Thank you very much. Let's see. There's more questions. What have we got? we've got those ones. Cool. Yeah. Shall we come to you, back to you, Duncan? You had another question, I believe. No? Okay, no worries. Anything in the chat that you both want to answer, Alex and Ruth? Anything that you can pick up out of the chat?
There's an interesting point here about I think it's also Amanda's pre-question about 68 million people, a lot of people to get to agree on these things. I mean, that's absolutely the issue here. There's a separate issue apart from scale, though. Okay, so it's a question of how do you come to agreement with that volume, and does anarchism ever have anything to say to this sort of thing? I mean, historically, I think we need to understand that anarchists have been incredibly successful at organizing at scale. So whether this is the labor unions in Peru and Argentina, or the takeover of the Spanish Republic in 1938, or whether this is Rojava over the last 10 years, and other places around the world where states just don't exist. So if you, for example, Colin Ward and David Graeber have often talked about what they call small a anarchism, where people are just sort of getting on with life in the absence of the state. The state is either antithetical to their aims or can't provide for them. And in those instances, people are effectively living in anarchy, right? And it's a self-organized mutual aid. It's not chaos. And this happens at scale, and we're talking millions of people here. And the questions we don't ask of this is not how can anarchism achieve X, but how are people already doing this at scale? And we don't know the answers to those questions because we assume that it's not happening. But the reality is that failed states, quote unquote, have been a standard feature of modern politics for the last, well, I don't know, since states were invented, let's say at the end of the 19th century. So the question we should be asking is not, can anarchism scale to 60 odd million people? The question is, how do 60 odd million people already organize without states? And there are countless examples of this. And we're just not very good at looking at them and understanding what's going on. And our intuition is that the anarchist politics, the small a anarchist politics that underpins those mass societies, are the sorts of things that anarchists have been trying to plug into and theorize and think about for the last 150 years. So this is pre-modern nation state, right? So modern nation states are a historical anomaly. They're not the norm across history. And what we need to do better is to try and understand how you can organize, or how we have organized historically without them, and then use those lessons to think about how we get beyond it in the future.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Great. Shall we wind up now? Does that work for you, Ruth and Alex?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you
Great.
everybody for coming.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. Really interesting discussions in the breakout room. Great questions. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and please check out the Anarchic Agreements pamphlet. It's downloadable for free. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll repost that in the chat.
Thank you.
There. And a big round of applause to both of you for this really amazing and informative talk and discussion as well. So yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Ruth.
Thanks everybody. Thanks Chris for organising.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for coming. And Alex and Ruth, can I check? Will either of you be in the open space afterwards? Basically,
I can't. I'm going to have to go, I'm afraid.
That's all right. No worries. Just wanted to check.
I wasn't aware there was one, so maybe I can stay on the call and you can tell me a bit about it, and then maybe I can stick around.
Yeah. Well, I've got to help set up the next call, but if you check online on the link on the Rev 21 Festival, you'll be able to see the open space. It's just a space where people can engage with speakers and talk about things and continue discussions, basically. Oh,
okay.
Cool.
Cheers, Chris.
Amazing. So, yeah, here's a little link before we go. Please do check out these resources and also donate. All the donations go to the speakers and their organizations. So do check that out. And that helps support the wonderful people who've given talks at this festival today. So yeah, don't forget to check out the open space. And again, thank you so much for coming, everybody. And I'm sure I'll see you in some of the next sessions.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.